Good morning, NASCAR fans. How's everyone doing? The NASCAR Cup Series playoffs continue this week, the round of 8. We are in Kansas for the Hollywood Casino 400. Joining me live this morning is Dane Chenault. How's it going today?
It's going good. Ready for the round of 8. Just winding down. 4 races, I guess, left this season.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Came to an end quick after we jumbled all the races in there, racing 2 or 3 times a week there for a while. So feels like it
was absolute insanity.
Yeah, it was a wild year for sure, and I'm sure we'll see
it's
crazy to end it. So
at one point we weren't even sure if we were going to see NASCAR again whatsoever. So I feel like we're pretty lucky that we've made it this far into the playoffs. There hasn't been any like COVID issues, that have really affected anything. So that's been awesome. The midweek races were great, stuff like that. But we're now in the playoffs. It's time to rock and roll. Tell us a little bit about the track. Obviously, you have your article up. If you guys haven't checked it out, head over to rotopros.com. You can check out Dane's preview article. What are you looking for this week from Kansas?
Yeah, the main thing I'm looking for is we do have a little bit of data from earlier this year when they raced here. But really, as I mentioned in the article too, I'm looking at recent form. I mean, when you get in these playoffs in NASCAR, you see a lot of guys that get hot and stay hot. And then you have other teams and drivers who aren't even racing for anything through the end of this year. Obviously, they still want to do as good as they can, but they might not be as prepared or putting as much funding in especially these small teams. So I'm looking more at recent form and looking back at what the data that we had earlier this year at Kansas. So I'm looking at really the last few races here. We've saw about 3 dominators. Whether you can get that many in your lineups, it's kind of tough to do. The way that they've done qualifying, qualifying and setting these lineups here recently and all year, which is getting kind of annoying, which is a separate topic for me. But I'm looking at 2 to 3 dominators. I probably can only get 2 in my lineups. So getting 2 of those guys and then a few place differential plays, which are kind of tough to come by.
I agree. It's there isn't as many like for place differential. I guess if looking at the top here, Kyle Busch stands out. He's not in the playoffs. He's a driver I think is still motivated to get that one win. He loves his stats. He hasn't made the playoffs. He's not happy. The car hasn't been good all year. He's been getting closer. He's been fairly good at this track, and just starting 20th, I think that's one place I'm definitely going to start this week. Under 10K makes a lot of sense. You've got the playoff drivers ahead of them. They're all 10K. You got 2 11K with Elliott and Truex. So I guess when it comes down to it, I usually in the top tier, if I'm building a 20 max player pool, I want to let's go ahead and group it 10K and up. We've got Keselowski, Harvick, Hamlin, Truex, and Elliott. I have chosen 3 out of that group as my core. And looking at my model this week, 4 of those 5 are actually 1, 2, 3, 4 in my model rankings. But for me personally, I'm looking at Chase Elliott this week. He's been kind of had a rough go of it recently in terms of looking at the intermediate stats. Where are we here? Yeah, 22nd and 20th in his last 2. That's at Vegas and Darlington. Those are in the playoffs. So not very great there. But I think he gets out. I think he's going to be top dominator starting from the pole this week. I think he can lead 100 plus. That's kind of what I'm projecting here. We're kind of looking at that one dominator 100 plus. I'm looking at maybe 3 or 4 in that 20 to 50, 20 to 60 range, something like that. I don't think Elliott gets upwards of where he's going to totally dominate, like 50% of the laps or anything like that. I think it's more of that 100. Probably 90 to 110 kind of is where I've got him. Right now I've got him as 120, but on the fantasy matrix, if you're looking at it, I'm really just ranking them as my favorites, not necessarily an exact projection in the laps led, just more of 4 guys that I think can lead laps and in the order of preference.
Yeah, so for me up top, I was kind of looking back at some of the stuff that we had earlier this year at Kansas. So Harvick was on the pole. And he actually didn't lead very many laps. So we had probably 3 to even 4 dominators back in earlier this year. And three of those 4 were Hamlin, Kyle, and Truex. So that just keeps me on these Toyotas. I know Kyle's out of the playoffs, but he did run well here this year, even when he was struggling. He started 8th, finished 11th, and had a lot of Dominator points. And then you had Hamlin, who won the race. He's won the last 2 races here. He's probably the top guy for me at 10K and above. And then Truex also had nearly about 30 Dominator points. And then you did have Brad Keselowski, who had right around 20 Dominator points. And he finished 2nd earlier this year. So I guess you could say 4. You were never going to get those 4 in one lineup. So what I'm leaning toward is going right back to the Joe Gibbs cars. Like you said, Kyle Busch. And then my favorite 2 above 10K are actually Hamlin and Truex. I'll be interested to see. I'm sure I can't remember right off what we had as far as a competition caution. I know we had one earlier this year, and that could have been why Harvick did not lead. That's maybe something I could go back and look at and see what transpired early in that race that kept Harvick from leading, because he was dominating races all year and he was starting from the pole and didn't have very many Dominator points. So that's just the one hesitation I want to see before I jump all in on Chase Elliott. But he has been running very well. He's in good form coming into this last stretch of the playoffs. So you can certainly go there. My favorite is, like I mentioned in my article a lot, sticking with these Toyotas. Hamlin would be my favorite, and then Kyle Busch and Martin Truex Jr.
I do remember that Kansas race earlier this year where I know I was I think on the show we had talked about Harvick quite a bit as our top Dominator, both of us, just because he'd kind of been awesome on the intermediate tracks all season. When I look at those stats here, Harvick is ahead of everyone. 3 wins, 7 top 10s. Him and Hamlin both have 3 wins, 7 top 5s. Sorry. Harvick has the edge. He's been more consistent. He's had 10 top 10s versus Hamlin, 7 top 10s, 475 laps led. Hamlin had 357. Truex had 480. So those 3 are definitely strong plays. I do remember Harvick lost the lead on lap 1, I believe, in that race. We were on him, and for some reason he fell back early, or not fell back a lot, but he fell back out of the lead early on to Chase in that race, I believe. And while he didn't really get back and give us Dominator points, which was pretty disappointing, he ended up only leading 9 laps total in the race. He did have an average running position of 6th, so he pretty much ran inside the top 5 all day. Just for some reason didn't have the car that we thought he did starting from the pole and would get out front with that clean air and lead. But who did lead the most in that race? Kyle Busch got up there, led 52 laps. Yeah, Hamlin coming from 10th, he led 57, Keselowski 30, Truex 44. I mean, it was pretty darn spread out with the no practice. Even down, we had Joe Logano had 27. So there were 6 drivers that had over 20 laps led and 2 over 50, none over 75. So I'm with you on maybe, like you said, you're not going to be able to, unless you think Chase absolutely, or one of these guys absolutely dominates, 50% of the laps or something like that. You can probably get 2, maybe not 3 of the Dominators in here, because I think they're going to come from this top tier 100%.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
Moving down here, kind of in this mid-range, there is a few plays that stand out. Obviously, first of all, outside of the top tier, my top-ranked driver is Eric Jones. He's got 41-1 odds, which I really do like today. I think I'm going to put a little bit of a bet down on him just because he's starting 11th. So for DFS, that seems like it's a little bit risky. Seems like it's a little bit forward for a driver that's out of the playoffs, where we can get Kyle Busch at just 1,500 more starting 20th. But Eric Jones here has finished 5th, 7th, 3rd, 4th, and 7th in his last 5 races. And looking at just specifically the 6 races in the playoffs, he leads all drivers with 4 top 5s and 5 top 10s. He is the only driver with 4 top 5s and 5 top 10s in the 6 playoff races so far. Average finish of 7th. It's just been absolutely incredible. 3rd, 2nd, 8th, 3rd in his last 4 races. I mean, I'm not looking at current form completely as a total weight in my model, just because we just went through Talladega and Charlotte Road Course. Nothing really correlated with this week, but just seeing that form playoffs and that 20 cars fast, I really do like him at that price.
Yeah, he's another guy lumped right into those Joe Gibbs cars. I think he's kind of on the different spectrum of them. He's trying to prove that he's got it so he can get a ride for next year, since he's going to be out of a ride. But like I said, I love all the guys in those Toyotas. And he's right up there for me as well. That really struck me when you posted that stat in our Slack chat earlier this week about how he had the best average finish, most top fives in the playoffs, and he's not even in the playoffs.
No,
so
crazy.
You can really tell that team's got it going, and that's kind of form that I like to see, especially of guys who are not in the playoffs. One last thing I will say, I know I'm just going all over these Toyotas, but if you go back to last year too, in the playoff race here that Hamlin also won, starting from 23rd, he led 153 laps. Larson led 60, and then Truex led 33. So I think the Joe Gibbs cars see this race in particular as a great opportunity to get themselves maybe locked into that final race at Phoenix. So I think they're going to be going all out, and I think this is a great opportunity for them, and that's why I'm going to stick right on them.
I like it. I definitely like it. In terms of FanDuel, I know we talk mostly DraftKings on our show and our content because that's mostly, I bet you, I know you play almost exclusively on DraftKings. I'm like 80% DraftKings, 20% FanDuel, but there are a few plays on FanDuel I wanted to mention that stand out a little bit more. Generally, the difference between the two in terms of scoring is half a point for place differential on FanDuel versus 1 point. There's no fast laps on FanDuel. Your laps led are 0.1 points. Versus half a lap or half a point on DraftKings. So starting position and, generally on DK, we're looking for, like you said, drivers inside the top 10 to kind of get out front and be those dominators. And the other guys that are starting top 10 who we don't really see as dominators, we generally fade them because at those prices, starting top 10, there's not a lot of place differential value. And if they're not going to get dominator value, it's very, very hard for them to hit value. It's a little bit different on FanDuel. So guys like William Byron stands out. He's starting 10th. That's someone I won't play on DraftKings starting 10th at $9K, especially considering Bowman is cheaper than him on DraftKings by $400. I know he's starting 6th, but those two especially, I'm going to get my Hendrick Motorsports exposure on FanDuel. I do think those cars are fast. Byron's been top 10 in his last 2 here. Bowman has been 11th or better with 3 top 10s in his last 4 here. So they both shown top 10 speed at this track. They've both been pretty good overall in terms of the intermediate tracks. So I will have exposure to them on FanDuel. Same stories, Kurt Busch starting 3rd. I don't think he's a dominator today for DraftKings. So those drivers specifically starting top 10, other than the ones that we talked about for dominators, that's where I'm going to get my exposure on FanDuel. Going down to the value range here, we got about 5-10 minutes left. I just want to go over a couple guys. I want to get your thoughts on Matt Kenseth. Starting 30th at 6,600, like an absolute steal. To me today, he should be super chalky because literally a 20th place finish gives him 34 points, and that's without fast laps or anything like that. And that's pretty much value right there. And I think he's kind of got that 10th to 15th place upside today.
Yeah, he's definitely got the upside. The one thing when I was doing my research a little earlier this week and looking at it was that this was a race that earlier this year, he struggled a lot this year, but he did have a top 20 finish. He got 17th. That would be plenty for him down here in this price range. So, and I don't know, I mean, you would think that he gets popular, but the way that he's kind of not been around this year, I don't know if he will maybe. So this might be an opportunity to lock him in. Not if you're playing a bunch of lineups, but to get a lot of exposure to him and get overweight, starting 30th, I think this is a good opportunity for him kind of coming to the end of this season. One thing I want to get your take on with these value guys, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, that we have not been seeing any qualifying, and they're setting this.
Oh, looks like we lost Dane here for a second. I'll try and get him back. I didn't quite get what he was going to ask me, but I know I'll just talk. Oh, there he is. He is back. I'm just going to add him here. There he is. You almost got the question off, and I was just kind of juggling. I didn't know how to answer it, but okay. So no qualifying in practice.
So with these guys not getting qualifying in practice, and they're setting these lineups by this algorithm or whatever they're doing, we're not getting as much value in place differential with these guys, but and it's really, for me, turning into like Ryan Preece, for example, 6,300. he's a guy we're used to starting mid-20s if there was qualifying or something, but he's been running fairly well recently, so he's starting 19th. For me, I think I'm still fine playing Ryan Preece starting 19th, and if he finishes in the top 20, I feel like that will pay off. Whereas in years past, starting where you qualified is not usually going to pay off because you have other place differential guys at these prices. But what's your take on that? I think it's kind of changed the way we have to look at this year.
Totally. It totally does. We really have to lower our kind of the way I floor in terms of fantasy points that we need for these value guys kind of changes a little bit because there isn't those place differential plays. Like you said, Ryan Preece, we're usually seeing 25th to 30th starting or even outside of that. And then you look at like Michael McDowell, he's like consistently starting mid-20s. That's kind of like his average finishing position. He's got upside on that, but usually we had seen him like closer to 30th. So we're losing some place differential there. So I 100% agree with you. And that is one reason. At first glance, Ryan Preece started 19th. I was like, no, fade. I will go to Matt Kenseth, John Hunter Nemechek starting 32nd. Maybe even take a risk with Chris Buescher there as well. Liz, perfect timing. Welcome to the show. I actually just mentioned John Hunter Nemechek starting 32nd. I do like that. He finished 19th here earlier this year, so I do like that place differential. With the pivot, I think Ryan Preece is going to be low owned. 2 intermediate races at Las Vegas and Darlington in the playoffs. He finished 19th and 17th. He started 21st at Las Vegas, finished 19th. So that's kind of similar to what we're seeing here today. He finished with 27.5 DK points. Normally, I would be looking for about 30 out of him, so that's pretty darn close to what we're looking for. And I think just with the lack, I think once we get like below Michael McDowell, the value drops off for me. That's kind of like I don't really dive into that 5K range a whole bunch, 1 or 2 guys maybe. I really like a little bit more balanced. So that really pushes me a lot more exposure on Preece, Nemechek, Michael McDowell. Matt Kenseth, obviously my favorite, but I'm with you 100% on we can't really just eliminate guys who, are normally it adds a more risk for sure. But we definitely have to change the way we construct our lineups and look for those value plays going forward for sure. Or not going forward, but during this whole pandemic, no practice stuff.
Hopefully we get that back next year, but I think I saw some rumblings of they're not gonna. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Even one practice, like
they
could really just, I know they want to get it into like a 1-day thing. That's kind of what the health official trying to advise them this whole time is that they want races for one series. Like last night, you seen the Cup cars at the end of the Xfinity race in Victory Lane. The Cup cars and the Cup trucks were bringing the cars into the track. Normally they're there Thursday. So they really want to bring this down to 1-day shows to kind of avoid exposure. So hopefully that changes and they open that up a bit where they can get to the track a day early and maybe get that. Give me one practice, just one practice where they can get out there for, I don't even care if it's 55 minutes, 30 minutes where they can go out once, make one adjustment, get back out there, at least have a starting point for the race, because it's just like that Harvick last Kansas race was a perfect example where Harvick looked, he had absolutely dominated the intermediate races up to that point since the return, him and Hamlin. He was starting from the pole. We've seen the pole guy there absolutely dominate. Boom, lap 1, he loses the lead. He only leads 9 laps in the race. Like, with practice, we probably maybe could have seen some trends where that was probably going to happen. Like his top, maybe he was outside the top 5 or top 10 in 10 lap averages or something like that. We don't have any of that. We, without hearsay, or they're all going to say, oh, my car's great. I think we have a fast car this weekend. They're all going to say that whether it's fast or not. You'll have the rare guy whenever you see those interviews during practice or whatever, or they're asking, yeah, we need to make some adjustments here or whatever. Normally it's, yeah, we got a fast car this week, or fast and all forward, or whatever it may be. So we get no information from teams before the race. So I'm excited to get to practice for sure. Do you have any other value plays that we haven't talked about that you're kind of looking at?
Really, once you cross into that 6K range, like you said, it's kind of tough playing much of anybody. If I do drop down there, it's going to be either Michael McDowell or Ty Dillon. They both had top 20 finishes as well back in, was it July? I think they raced here. something earlier this year. They both had top 20 finishes as well. So that'd be the only two that I'm going to below 6K. I mean, mid-range, you've mentioned guys like Eric Jones, Almirola is an option. Tyler Reddick also had a pretty good run here earlier this year, 13th. So you could go there, but really, for me, it's getting as many dominators and guys that are these value plays.
I think if you want to go a little bit contrarian in that mid-range, someone we haven't talked about, like we talked about Eric Almirola, I'd like Almirola starting a little bit further back. But 16th, I mean, like you said, with no practice qualifying the way things are, we don't really have those, elite place differential plays, or it's at least minimized how many we do have. So 16th seems all right for him, considering he's finished 12th or better here in 5 of his last 6. So yeah, definitely on him. But as some pivots, I talked about some FanDuel guys in Kurt Busch, Bowman, and Byron. I love Reddick. You mentioned him, 13th and 9th in his 2 trips here. He's starting 15th. So him and Almirola are kind of right there in that same row of starting position. I think they're both pretty decent plays. I like Almirola slightly better just because of the experience. Going down, I like Austin Dillon a little bit for GPP. He's been trending down at this track specifically, but this season's been a lot different for him. They're showing more speed than they ever have before. Really excited about that. And Cole Custer starting 13th. I don't think many people are going to be on him whatsoever with all these other guys that have better place differential value. Even Christopher Bell starting 22nd. That's quite a big difference in terms, I think. Obviously, Custer I like a little bit better, and I'm probably going to have more Custer in like my Harvick stacks to get those Fords, assuming that the Fords are going to be fast today. But looking at Custer specifically, his last 3 intermediate tracks, 16th, 12th, and 7th, that's Vegas, Darlington, and Kansas, 2 of them in the playoffs. So seeing that 7th at Kansas earlier really stands out as well. And then a 12th and 16th follow-up in the intermediate tracks. He's just someone I'm looking at as maybe if I start getting too much exposure in my 20 maxes to say Almirola and Jones or Kenseth, he's right in between those guys, and I'm going to make that pivot off to kind of differentiate my lineups a little bit. So it's a lot of risk starting 13th, but I think he can definitely has upside of that 7th again, even like a 10th, 12th finish where he starts kind of thing.
Yeah, like you said, with Tyler Reddick, he's one of my favorites in that range that I'd kind of mentioned. But he actually had that top 10 here in the 31 car for Childress when he was still full-time in Xfinity, which is a pretty good finish there for him. So it kind of shows that he likes this place, that he's also had another solid run here earlier this year too. So if you follow that mid-range, he's probably my favorite right around there.
For sure. So that covers some plays. Like I said, if you want a little bit more here before lock, I think lock is about an hour to the NFL lock, looking about 2 p.m. Eastern, I think, sometime right around there. Actually, I think it is only a half an hour after NFL lock today, so I'm about to go scramble here for about an hour and a half. Go and check out Dane's article. That's rotopros.com. It'll be right there on the homepage. Check that out. Read it over, check out his top plays, get into RotoPros Slack chat. Me and Dane are in there up to lock, answering all your questions. Get over to patreon.com/JagerBombs. I've got a Slack chat as well in there answering questions. Our skeletons will be posted. I've actually posted mine over on RotoPros and over on Patreon. So those are ready for you. If you got any questions, definitely hit us up. And DFSR.com, I'll be in that chat as well. Let's go make some lineups. Let's see some green screens and let the playoffs go and see, I guess, before we go, who is your pick to win that's going to be in, I was going to say Miami, who's going to be in Phoenix waiting for that championship trophy?
I think, actually, I hate to say this because I'm not a big fan of him, but I think it's Denny Hamlin's year to get it done. I think he's finally going to get it done. Him and Harvick have both kind of dominated through the year. I think today's the day Hamlin locks himself in by picking up 3 wins in a row here at Kansas. It's a great opportunity. He's good at Martinsville here in a couple weeks too. I think he's for sure going to be in that top 4, and then I think he can get it done. Who's yours?
Well, I'm going to go against you. I like Hamlin a lot. For my win today, I'm going to go back to Harvick. He hasn't won since all the way back at the start of the playoffs. It's been quite a while here, but I'm torn between Elliott and Harvick. Who's going to win? I really think Elliott, Harvick, the top 4 drivers in price, and I really do think are going to be like right there in the mix of the top 5 all day if there's no like wrecks or anything, which is going to throw some variance. But put me on the spot. I'm going to go with my model. I'm going Kevin Harvick for the win, and we'll be in Phoenix waiting for everybody else to come. Thanks for showing up, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting. Questions asked. We will see you in chat. Let's go get some green screens. Have a great day, everyone.